Watching a Highwire Media podcast. Welcome to an all-new episode of the Big D Breakdown, where we talk all things Cowboys. This week, we break down the latest headlines and news coming from AT&T Stadium following Week 2's loss against the New Orleans Saints. So without further ado, let's dive into our first topic and take a look at 5 Cowboys who deserve blame for the humiliating loss against the Saints. It wasn't just Cowboy players who came up small against the Saints. If there were any good vibes permeating from the Dallas Cowboys Week 1 win, they vanished early in the first quarter of Sunday's 44-19 loss to the New Orleans Saints. Pegged as touchdown favorites in their home opener and widely predicted to win convincingly, the Cowboys suffered their second straight blowout loss at home. The defeat ended Dallas's 16-game home winning streak in the regular season, but fans care very little about that right now. Mike Zimmer's honeymoon phase is over, and the Cowboys' lack of playmakers on offense beyond CeeDee Lamb proved costly in the loss. There is plenty of blame to go around after a 35-point massacre at home, but these coaches and players deserve the biggest share of the blame pie. So, number 5, we got the Cowboys' nose tackles. And celebrated when Dallas added veteran nose tackles Jordan Phillips and Linval Joseph after the preseason, gave them an NFL-caliber interior defensive line rotation. But it was wishful thinking that 2 players north of 30 would make a seismic impact. The Cowboys' linebacker room caught a lot of heat for their performance, but the nose tackles didn't do them any favors. It looked a lot like last season. PFF's John Owning highlighted a play in the red zone where DeMarvion Overshawn had to fill 2 gaps while defeating a block because Joseph got stonewalled. Ozzie Smith also got blown off the ball a ton and got straight up tackled on a third down play. The Saints, doing whatever they wanted on the ground, took the air out of AT&T Stadium, and that starts with a play of Dallas's nose tackles. And number 4, of course, at the end of the day, head coach Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy's offense did more than enough to keep the game competitive before they resorted to hero ball in the third quarter. However, the head coach's game plan on first down was maddening. Despite finding minimal success on 1st and 10 runs, McCarthy kept going back to the well to set up 2nd and long. Additionally, McCarthy seemed to force touches for Deuce Vaughn and Kevontae Turpin. Vaughn had 4 carries for 11 yards, while Turpin managed 6 yards on 3 touches. Turpin also had a bad drop. While Mike Zimmer's defense blew the game, the head coach needs to shoulder some of the blame after their team is embarrassed at home. And number 3, Donovan Wilson. The Cowboys' defense was a collective disaster, but Wilson stuck up the joint more than his teammates. He lost the ball in the air on Rashid Shaheed's 70-yard touchdown catch in the first quarter that gave the Saints a 14-3 lead. It was a beautiful throw by Derek Carr, who hit Shaheed in stride, but Wilson's lack of speed and poor coverage instincts were noticeable. Known for getting downhill and blowing up running plays, Wilson was bamboozled by New Orleans' outside scheme. It won't be long before Cowboys fans call for Thomas or Marquise Bell to start over Wilson. And number 2, Jalen Brooks. It's hard to pin blame on an offensive player when a defense surrenders 44 points and forces only 1 punt. However, the game would have been closer, or at least within striking distance for Prescott, if not for 2 back-breaking mistakes from Brooks. Early in the second quarter, Brooks blew his blocking assignment on a Brandon Cooks end-around. Cooks had a realistic chance of finding the end zone on the play, but he was tackled for a 3-yard loss. Prescott was sacked on 3rd and 10 on the next play to force a field goal. 4 points don't seem like a big deal in the grand scheme, but a touchdown would have made the score 14-10. Later, Brooks stumbled out of his break and a perfectly placed pass by Prescott was intercepted. The score was a salvageable 28-13 at the time, and Dallas was driving near midfield. A touchdown on that drive makes it a 1-score game and completely flips the momentum. Brooks might have to ride the bench next week after this performance. And finally, number 1, Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer deserves to face the music more than any other player or coach. While it's on the players to execute his scheme, the scheme was an utter disaster. To say Zimmer was outcoached by Saints offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak would be an understatement. A lot of the same problems that haunted Dallas under Dan Quinn reared their ugly head on Sunday. They offered 0 resistance against the run, allowing Alvin Kamara to gallop for 115 yards and 4 total touchdowns in essentially 3 quarters. While the Saints ran largely an outside scheme, Kamara was rarely touched before he was 3 yards upfield, even on inside carries. Furthermore, Zimmer's defense got burned by the speed and wiggle of receivers Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. There are countless stats that underline how embarrassing the performance was, but only one is needed to tell the story of Sunday. Dallas allowed touchdowns on the Saints' first 6 possessions. That is worse than the wildcard loss versus Green Bay back in January. Let me know your thoughts on the Cowboys' performance against the Saints in the comments section below. And of course, let's try to keep it nice and family friendly despite how angry we are at the Cowboys. So now we're going to take a look at 3 Cowboys off-season mistakes that reared their ugly head in the loss against the Saints. Dallas Cowboys got demolished, like we said, 44-19 in their Week 2 game against the Saints. A week after things could not have started any better, many are looking at this team a lot differently. Dak Prescott and the offense looked okay at times, but could hardly make up for how poorly the defense played. This was the Cowboys' first regular season loss at home since the opener against the Buccaneers in 2022. Many could not help but compare Dallas's performance with how last year's wildcard game ended. The defense let a good running back run roughshod on them, and the secondary had no answer for Derek Carr. Issues go beyond that, however. The Cowboys did little to nothing this offseason to really improve the roster that took the field in January. There are many mistakes the team made this offseason in terms of putting this roster together, but 3 stand out the most based on this past Sunday's game. Number 3, not signing a starting caliber running back. The Cowboys do not have a starting running back right now. After letting Tony Pollard walk, many suspected the Cowboys would be looking for help to fill that void in free agency or the draft. They did, but the moves do not look good. The Cowboys signed Rico Dowdle to a 1-year deal and signed Royce Freeman before the draft. After they failed to draft a running back, they brought back Ezekiel Elliott. All these moves scream that Jerry Jones scrambled just trying to put a bunch of running backs on the field by the time training camp started. Freeman was cut, leaving Elliott and Dowdle as the main backs entering this season. Neither one has done anything impressive in 2 games. Both only combined for 66 yards against Cleveland and against New Orleans. Dallas only had 68 total rushing yards. Dowdle got the most carries, but that number was only 7, which yielded only 30 yards. Overall, the fact Dallas did not address a skill position in the offseason has come back to bite them. If the Cowboys cannot establish the run game this season, Prescott and the offense will struggle in games and wins will be harder to come by. There is hope with the team having Dalvin Cook on the practice squad. With the lack of a running game and no true running back emerging from the pack, it would not be surprising to see Cook activated sooner rather than later. And number 2, trusting the young receivers. The Cowboys' offense has looked very similar in recent years when it comes to who is catching passes the most. CeeDee Lamb has led the team in receiving every year since 2021. The second best receiver is the starting tight end. Dalton Schultz was second on the team in receiving in 2022. And last year was Jake Ferguson. With Ferguson injured, Dallas needs help outside of Lamb in the passing game. So far, that has not happened. Every team who watches film on the Cowboys knows Lamb is the primary target. The Saints knew that too. With Lamb facing double teams and no Ferguson, young receivers such as Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks needed to step up. Tolbert actually had one of his best games with 82 yards on 6 catches, including a 39-yard snag with Paulson Adebo draped all over him. However, he still had some big drops. While Tolbert might finally be trending in the right direction, the same cannot be said for Jalen Brooks. He had 1 catch in the game but made several mistakes. In the second quarter, with Dallas down 14-3 and driving in the red zone, he missed a key block on an end around by Brandon Cooks that likely would have led to a touchdown. If the Cowboys score there, then it's only a 4-point game. Brooks' day only got worse later in the quarter when Dallas mounted a drive down 28-13. With the game still winnable, Brooks slipped while running a slant route, and Adebo was right there next to him to make the interception on Prescott. Once again, a receiver let Prescott down, leading to a pick. That was not on Prescott. Overall, these young receivers are not helping the passing game and taking the focus off of Lamb. With Ferguson still likely out and the lack of a running game, this group needs to take more steps forward against Baltimore. It would also not be surprising seeing Ryan Flournoy activated from the practice squad next week. The rookie had a solid camp and could be worth giving a shot as the 3rd and 4th receiver. And finally, number 1, waiting until August to bring in a defensive tackle. Cowboys lost one of their key starting defensive tackles this offseason. Jonathan Hankins might have been injury prone during his short stint in Dallas, but he helped plug the middle of that line to stop the run. Dallas's run defense is still not improved after the past few seasons. They gave up 190 rushing yards to the Saints. Alvin Kamara had 3 rushing touchdowns. Many could not help but think about last year's playoff loss when Aaron Jones ran at will on this defense. Dallas did not address defensive tackle the whole offseason, with the exception of the draft. They selected Justin Rogers in the 7th round, but he got cut and immediately signed with the Bengals. Once again, like with John Ridgway, the front office wasted a draft pick and saw the player go elsewhere right away. Fortunately, they added some veterans during training camp. The Cowboys traded for Jordan Phillips and signed Linval Joseph in August. Both have seen ample playing time, but neither player has stood out. Quite the opposite, actually. Odoizi is the leader of this group, but he needs help inside. With Mozzie Smith so far not living up to his first-round pick status, Dallas scrambled to get help before the season. Phillips was on the Giants to start camp, but Joseph had been a free agent all offseason. With neither being here for that long, one cannot expect the chemistry to be there right away. The Cowboys had addressed defensive tackle and free agency during the beginning of the offseason or higher in the draft. The situation would be different. Mike Zimmer is already under fire for how his defense performed on Sunday. With the optimism for players like Micah Parsons and how well this unit has looked since 2021, the pressure is on Zimmer to keep these defense at the top of the league. When they get stops and create turnovers, this team can go places. But it isn't going anywhere if its defensive tackles continue to get blown off the ball. Before we dive into our next topic, give us a thumbs up if you like our videos, hit that subscribe button down below, hit that bell notification button to be notified of future Dallas Cowboy news videos. With that, our next topic, multiple Cowboys should be benched for an embarrassing effort on Alvin Kamara touchdown. Mike Zimmer needs to hold these players accountable. The Dallas Cowboys coaching staff and players were not on the same page after the humiliating home loss to the New Orleans Saints. Mike Zimmer commendably took accountability for the loss after his defense allowed 6 straight touchdowns to open the game. Zimmer is not of the belief that poor effort spawned the defensive woes on Sunday. Micah Parsons defended Zimmer on social media immediately after the loss and stated on his podcast that the defense's 11 starters did not give the requisite effort. Mike McCarthy then turned around and said he didn't think the problem on defense was effort. Coaches and players giving cliché answers to the media is a weekly tradition. After diving into the film, though, they likely agree that effort was, in fact, a big problem. Alvin Kamara's 57-yard catch-and-run touchdown was the biggest indictment on the defense. It wasn't just Kamara who sprinted past the Cowboys' defense. Even 316-pound guard Cesar Ruiz outpaced Zimmer's players. Just when Cowboy fans thought the loss couldn't get any more humiliating, it is pathetic that Ruiz was more hungry to block for Kamara than Dallas defenders were to prevent the running back from reaching the end zone. DeMarcus Lawrence was the only Cowboy who gave the expected effort when an opponent makes a beeline for the end zone. Players such as Eric Kendricks, who was late to react to the screen, jogging at around the 35-yard line. He never had an angle to make a play, but as a grizzled veteran, one would expect him to sprint the distance. Lawrence started 5 yards behind Kendricks and managed to outpace him. Another guilty party is rookie cornerback Jalen Carson. While Kamara still has elite breakaway speed at 29 years old, Carson isn't a snail. He ran a 4.48 second 40-yard dash at the combine, and yet he was out of the picture by the time Kamara found pay dirt. The 5th-round pick compounded his mistake of taking a bad angle by giving lackluster effort. It is shocking that a button-up rookie like Carson couldn't be bothered to pursue Kamara, especially when he could have at least slowed the running back had he taken a better angle. While Kendricks and Carson deserve to ride the bench, Zimmer does not have the resources to do so. Kendricks has the most experience in Zimmer's defense of any Cowboy. He's the field general and is a strong bet to play the most snaps this season, or close to it. With Dayron Bland on IR, Carson is forced to start opposite Trayvon Diggs. Zimmer could send a message by starting Andrew Booth over Carson, but Booth has been a healthy scratch in both games and was up and down in preseason. Hopefully Zimmer gave Kendricks and Carson an earful while breaking down film. More efforts like this will surely come with consequences. And now we're going to take a look at our next topic. Cowboys are making a shocking reunion after struggling defender goes on the IR. The Cowboys made a flurry of surprising roster moves on Wednesday. It's only been 2 games, but the Dallas Cowboys' interior defensive line play might be worse than it was last season. And that is saying something. They traded for Jordan Phillips and signed Linval Joseph in the span of a week after training camp, and neither player has colored themselves in glory. That's as generous as we can put it. The Cowboys clearly missed Jonathan Hankins, who was serviceable, if not unspectacular, at the nose tackle position. Mazi Smith, who hasn't even made a tackle in 2 games, has far and away been Mike Zimmer's best interior defender. While Joseph played horribly against the Saints, Phillips may have already worn out his welcome in Dallas after a childish sequence this past Sunday where he chose to tackle an already fallen Saints offensive lineman instead of pursuing Derek Carr on a negated touchdown. It could be a while before Cowboys fans see Phillips take the field again. He was placed on IR Wednesday with a wrist injury, which knocks him out a minimum of 4 games. In a corresponding move, Dallas signed old friend Carlos Watkins off the Commanders' practice squad. Cowboys have had bad luck with adding aging defensive tackles. While Hankins was serviceable after he came over via trade, he missed time due to injury in both seasons. Being that Phillips was playing poorly before the injury and will now miss at least 4 games, you have to wonder if he'll be back at all. This makes the preseason trade look even worse. Since Phillips was on the 46-man roster for 2 games, the Cowboys officially gave up their 2026 6th-round pick to the Giants, and they will receive New York's 7th-round pick in 2026. Among interior defenders who have played at least 30 snaps, Phillips' 29.6 player grade is the 2nd worst at the position per PFF. Signing Watkins is really just addition by subtraction. A former 4th-round pick of the Texans, Watkins spent the 2021 and 2022 season with Dallas. He made 27 appearances, including 18 starts, 14 coming in 2021, and tallied 1 sack, 7 tackles for loss, 11 pressures, and 37 defensive stops. Watkins failed to make the Commanders and Rams 53-man rosters this summer. He's a below-average interior defender, but he cannot be any worse than what the Cowboys have trotted out theirs so far this season. It took 2 games for preseason trade to blow up in the Cowboys' face. Maybe don't wait until August to address a huge need, Mr. Jones. Jerry Jones appeared on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas on Tuesday and revealed he didn't know that the rival Eagles lost on Monday night. The result means that the Cowboys didn't lose any ground in the NFC East, even though they were thrashed at home by the Saints. It would appear that Jones is late to come around on a lot of things, most notably the biggest warts on the Cowboys roster. Some major offseason mistakes were glaring in Sunday's loss, including not signing a starting caliber running back. Having J.K. Dobbins would be pretty nice right about now. The Cowboys also regret trusting their young receivers instead of drafting, signing, or trading for a dependable number 3 receiver. Jones's biggest mistake, though, was waiting until August to address the interior defensive line. Though Mazi Smith is improved, Dallas lost starting nose tackle Jonathan Hankins didn't find his replacement until it acquired veteran Jordan Phillips from the Giants. The team also signed 35-year-old Linval Joseph. Both players were a disaster against the Saints. While Joseph's film was arguably worse than Phillips, the latter had a bonehead sequence on the Saints' first drive out at halftime that was the nail in Dallas's coffin. If you watch highlights, you can see Phillips choosing to turn around and attack New Orleans' right tackle instead of pursuing Derek Carr. It's up for debate if Phillips would have rattled Carr's cage. He had a lot of ground to make up for a 330-pound nose tackle. However, the fact that he didn't even try to make a play and instead chose to tackle an already grounded lineman is pathetic. It's not tough, it's hilarious for all the wrong reasons. The Cowboys' defense fell for the play action, so Carr had a clean pocket. Foster Moreau was also wide open downfield for an easy touchdown, but if Phillips didn't think twice about rushing Carr, he would have at least forced the quarterback to rush the throw. Maybe it doesn't make a difference, maybe it does, that's not the point. Luckily, the play was negated by an ineligible man downfield penalty, but the Saints regrouped and scored a touchdown 7 plays later to extend their lead to 41-19, thanks to a Jordan Lewis pass interference on 3rd and 9 that set up 1st and goal. Like we mentioned, Mike McCarthy said that he didn't think the problem on defense was effort. While Phillips knocked over the Saints' OT, it qualified as a 0 effort because he gave up on the play. It's made even worse being that Phillips got worked in the trenches all game and hung Dallas's linebackers out to dry. It's only 2 games, but the Phillips trade looks like a disaster. That's the consequences of waiting until August to address a huge need. And now on to our next topic. Sure sounds like Jordan Phillips is calling out the Cowboys after being placed on injured reserve. The Dallas Cowboys traded for Jordan Phillips over the offseason, and it's been a massive mistake. Like we've mentioned already multiple times, the NFL defensive lineman has not been very good in his first 2 games of the season, and that's putting it nicely. To make matters worse for Phillips, he's headed to IR after re-injuring his wrist injury and is reportedly unhappy about how things have gone down. Dallas's defensive tackle got snippy with the media when asked about the decision to put him there. When asked about the move, Phillips put on his sassy pants with his response saying, quote, "I don't know, that's above my pay grade. You have to ask the people making the decisions." Multiple Cowboys beat reporters noted that Phillips seemed frustrated by the events. Clarence Hill Jr. said it best when he said, "It is what it is. Phillips has to accept the decision of the organization." Maybe this would be a bigger deal if Phillips had been any good this season, but that has not been the case. The former second-round pick has graded out as the 3rd worst interior defensive lineman, according to PFF, and at this point is unplayable, injured or not. Of course, the entire Cowboys defense was put on notice this past week with the absolute shellacking the Saints gave them. Alvin Kamara rushed for 3 touchdowns, had a receiving touchdown against the Cowboys in Week 2, and the Saints just flat out dominated the Cowboys on the defensive side of the ball. Phillips looked awful in this game and had several baffling plays. One that has been discussed heavily is when he decided to go head-to-head with the Saints' right tackle, rather than attempt to put pressure on Derek Carr, who carved up the Cowboys all day long. Phillips hasn't been what the Cowboys were hoping for, and if this ends up being the last the Cowboys end up seeing of Phillips, this tantrum he's throwing will be what fans remember him for the most, and that's certainly not ideal. And before we take off for the evening, I'd also like to highlight our affiliate of the week, and that is Game Time. We know how much Cowboy fans live and breathe every snap, every touchdown, every win. That's why Game Time is here to make sure you never miss a moment of the action, whether it's catching the Cowboys live at AT&T Stadium or scoring last-minute tickets to that crucial away game. Game Time has got you covered. Why choose Game Time? Well, you can score a last-minute day off or just can't resist the urge to see the boys in action. Game Time offers unbeatable deals on tickets, even on game day. With just a few taps, secure your seats, skip the line, and get straight to cheering on Dak, Micah, and the rest of the team. Want to be close to the action? Choose your perfect spot and feel the energy of the game from the best seats in the house. And of course, instant delivery. No need to wait. The tickets are delivered directly to your phone. Just scan and go. So whether you're a diehard season ticket holder or just looking to catch a game or two, Game Time has your back. Download the Game Time app today, and let's make this season unforgettable together. And with that, don't forget to hit our thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button down below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thebigd. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.